Just to make sure your last name is pronounced Aburmishan?
Aburmishan.
Aburmishan.
Make it more Chicago, less ethnic.
Aburmishan.
There you go.
Hi, this is Inez.
And this is Kathy.
And we are XX Will Travel, the podcast for independent women travelers. Today we have a really special guest, Mona Aburmishan.
Yay!
Yay! Yeah. So Mona has performed, emceed, and produced comedy shows, competitions, and events in major clubs, theaters, and universities around the world. In addition to comedy, Mona is a sought-after speaker in various socio-political topics in the U.S. and the Middle East. She has a master's in international development and is fluent in English, German, and Arabic. She's lived and performed in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, and Mona also uses her global insights and perspectives, as well as her homegrown Chicago style, to offer a fresh look at the funny that's all around us. Recently, she headlined Comedy Central Arabia's latest season 2 premiere, Stand Up Al Waqif, filmed on location in Dubai, and she was the first female to headline this groundbreaking series produced by Viacom. She's been pretty much everywhere, featured on Chicago's #1 daytime talk show, Windy City Live. She also hosts a comedy bowl in Chicago, Funny Fridays at the Tamale Hut, as well as the first ever Arab-American comedy showcase called the Southside Comedy Show. So she runs classes, workshops. She's an all-around badass, and she's here to talk to us about traveling as a woman comedian.
Yay!
Welcome, Mona.
Thank you.
All right, so my first question is, you have a master's in international development and you're fluent in 3 languages. How did you come to comedy?
How did I become a comedian? So how I became a comedian is I had kind of a come-to-Jesus meeting with myself when I was turning 29. And I realized that either, because I was finishing up my master's in terms of the actual thesis part, and I was working for a commercial real estate firm. And the only reason why I was working for that firm is because it was tied to international development, and I just felt stuck. And I thought either I pack everything up and I go somewhere in Africa or the Middle East where my thesis is actually about, and work in urban planning and development, or I just change gears and try something I've always wanted to try. And at the same time, my family, especially my mother, had been pushing at me about comedy. Do Second City. You're really funny. You have all these accents. Just do it. Do it. It's like they were bullying me into something. And so at that moment, I said, okay, let's just screw it. And so I took a stand-up comedy class. I hated the class. I'm the only one that ever says that. I hated the class, and I don't think they're really that great in terms of serving comedians. But we'll talk about that later if you want. Mm-hmm. But the first time I performed, it was as if, you know, when you're craving something and then you finally get it and it's perfect. Like, oh my God, the bread Maggiano's with the olive oil and the Parmesan cheese. Like, sometimes I'm just craving it, and when it hits my mouth, I'm like, yes. Me doing stand-up in front of an audience of people from all over Chicago, and making them laugh, making a bunch of strangers laugh. It was like, yes, it felt so right. I'm like, this is it. Because I was able to use my intelligence, my ability to connect with people and speak about a powerful topic, but in a lighthearted way. I mean, I grew up with such a heavy conversation of being Palestinian and Muslim and a woman and, right? And American and all this stuff that everything always felt like marching, this, protesting, that. But when it came to comedy, I could say what I needed to say, but people left feeling touched, moved, and inspired, or they felt happy, or they laughed. So once I was like, that's it. 2015, middle of 2015 is when I went comedy full-time. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I was doing everything I could to kind of shift my life so that I could be a full-time comic. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and more.
Yeah. How did you start traveling as a comedian? Do you remember the first tours, if you want to call them that way, that you did?
So the way it kind of works for a new comic is if you're given an opportunity from somebody who saw you maybe in Chicago. And I applied for, it was called the New York Arab Comedy Festival. And I applied for it and I got in. and it was like New Faces. And it's at Gotham Theater in New York. So that was the first time I ever did stand-up outside Chicago. So that was the first time I ever traveled for it. And I loved it. And I was like, more of this, please. And then just gradually. So like if I did a show in DC, and then one of the guys in DC was like, hey, I'm producing something in San Francisco. Would you come out? Yeah, I go out, and that's the whole point. You got to kill. So, because in San Francisco, they're just trusting the faith of the guy from DC. You got to deliver. And so then, since then, I created a powerful relationship with my folks in San Francisco, where they kept calling me back. And, and then like it happens in Detroit. I go to Dearborn and Detroit frequently because of an opportunity. I kill, and they're like, oh, we got to bring her back. So it's kind of like that. That's really how the ball starts rolling. Then it doesn't really start with tours. It's kind of like these one-off opportunities.
So it's just a lot of networking and
yes.
having good stuff and killing.
Yeah.
I mean, uncomfortable and awkward question,
Yes.
but I am curious. Would you be paid to go to these places, or is it all like it's kind of an investment you yourself made in your career?
So yeah, sometimes it's a lot. Actually, a lot of it. I've seen my relationship to comedy as having taken on another master's program. San Francisco referred to me by DC. That was paid, but just a little. The opportunity in New York wasn't, and we travel and spend money and time for like 8 minutes of stage time or 5 minutes of stage time. Like when I went to Dubai, that was almost 8,000 miles for 2 7-minute sets. So 14 minutes, literally I went all that way just for 14 minutes of stage time. And sometimes they pay and sometimes they don't. But really it's like, it's an investment in accessing a new marketplace. So that's really how I see it. And also the most beautiful part about traveling for stand-up, this is the most powerful part, is that you get to test the validity of a joke from all different angles. So like, I remember when I first started stand-up, I had this one joke, and in it, one of the tags was about a cab driver. And it hits in New York, it hits in Chicago, but it snoozed in LA. That was before, right? Because people don't use cabs in LA. So it never really hit right. So that was the best part about traveling for I get to see how a joke, like how awesome it is from all sides. And then for me, when it comes to taking and having to take it onto TV or record it, it's those gems that I want to be able to just give out because it'll hit everyone. And also that's why there's a lot of criticism for comedians, like, yeah, I've heard your joke before. Well, you may have heard it here, but you didn't hear it there, and I'm trying to test the joke from all different angles. And when a comedian has to create a whole new album, it's a lot of work like that, where you're taking this one little bit and you've got to test it everywhere to see if it hits in different angles. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're on a comedy tour. What's the longest you've toured? Like, have you done like multi-city stuff or?
No. Actually, well, yes. The two tours that I did in Palestine, that was the longest because I always tack on a week in London on each side because I worked the London market a lot. So then you have a week on each side, and then I had one really dense week of touring within Palestine. So that kind of turned into a 3.5 week tour, some of my own creation, but some of it was me, traveling through the West Bank and doing shows within there.
Wow.
So not as long as a lot of other people. Sometimes comics are on the road for like years.
How did that Palestine tour come about?
Maybe I should back up a little bit. I grew up in Chicago as a Palestinian-American. So I'm half British, half Palestinian. And with that dynamic, my parents felt it was important to send their kids to Palestine every summer. So the first time I ever traveled was when I was 13, in order to get acclimated to what it's like to have a dual identity. And that's something I would really encourage all dual identity mixed kids in the city, or in Chicago, across the country. That way you have a good balance of who you actually are, right? So having spent that much time, I was pretty comfortable with Palestine. So a lot of my sets that if I ever performed for Palestinians or Arabs, it came from a place of knowledge and experience. Inside jokes, little tags, which is invaluable. So all the comedians in the city of Chicago that perform and can perform in multiple languages, it's a real huge asset, and it's, I think, a skill set that's not very appreciated in Chicago. If you can perform in both languages, because you have to know insights and little idiosyncrasies and inside jokes and stuff like that. Anyway, so with that being said, I've become comfortable and kind of become known as one of the only few Palestinian female comedians in the States. And so a guy by the name of Amr Zahar, who he performed maybe 8 years prior to me starting stand-up, I had reached out to him. I said, man, I really like what you're doing. You're so cool, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, if I ever come in town, because he lives in Dearborn, I'll reach out to you. He reached out to me in 2010. And since then, I've created a powerful relationship with him. I go to Dearborn a lot, blah, blah, blah. And it was him that had created the relationship with the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem and pitched to them, I see that you do a lot of cross-cultural like liaison events between Americans and Palestinians, and you're bringing in film and dance. Why don't you bring in stand-up? Because there's a lot of Palestinian-American comedians, and stand-up is an American thing. But there's versions of comedy in the Arab world. This is a perfect idea. And the U.S. consulate was like, right on. So they funded the whole thing. They created a whole tour to all the different cities, from Jerusalem to Bethlehem to Ramallah. It was very powerful. And so he created that. He put an ideal tour together, and he did that both years. The second year, the U.S. pulled out literally 2 days before the tour was starting because of American politics or Israeli politics or whatever. But the tour still continued, and we're hoping to keep bringing it back. It's just going to have to be like a self-funded event versus it being a U.S. thing. So it was really, really awesome, and it created a lot of press for the U.S. consulate in Jerusalem. Really, but again, that was during Obama. So once all the shifts started happening,
what shift, Mona?
Chaos. Oh my God.
Right.
Yeah.
During the rosy Obama years.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome, though. Did you get to meet other Palestinian comedians or Palestinian-American comedians?
Yeah, Palestinian comedians, Egyptian comedians. On both tours, we've had an African-American comedian, Heather, who's really cool, from Dearborn. We have a half-black, half-Iranian comedian, Tehran, who's based in L.A. We got Mo Amer, who right now is touring with Dave Chappelle. Ahmed, who's an Egyptian comedian who's really, really well-known. He's on some TV shows and stuff. But yeah, it was really just a real vibe connection because we're all have different stories, but we're all committed to like just bringing joy. I mean, the second time we came back, they were saying that there was this vacuum of sadness that was created once we left. There was so much excitement for American comedians to come through, and then the excitement of the event. And then when we all left, it was as if the Palestinians were kind of faced with like, oh yeah, we still live in occupied Palestine. You know, we can watch videos, but yeah, so that's why I'm so committed to going back there regularly, because there's a level of just joy and connection and just vitality that's created when you go to watch stand-up. And also because they had gotten so used to, especially because of the internet and YouTube and all that stuff, they know stand-up. So I'm sure one of the questions is like, what language were you delivering these jokes in?
Yeah.
Well, I only had to deliver them in the same way I had been doing it here in Chicago or in Detroit or in DC. It was this hybrid of Arabic and English because there's so many expats, American expats that live in Palestine. They're so fluent in English anyway, and they've been watching stand-up anyway. But the real power was as a community, and that's why I think we take for granted also stand-up as such a powerful art, is that the audience really felt they were heard. Because they had been watching Black comics, Latino comics, white comics, blah. They had never seen a Palestinian female saying the stuff I was saying, or Palestinian men, or Arab men, or Muslim, you know, there's just this real power of like, you guys get me, kind of stuff. And then that thing, you know, it also came in laughter. So cultivating new audiences for stand-up comedy around the world is it's powerfully healing. It is. And having worked with Viacom and Comedy Central Arabia, it's called MENA, really. It's the Middle East, North Africa region. They're cultivating comedians. Like the show that I was on is as a result of them literally going into a region, like going to Beirut, Lebanon, going to Egypt, going to Jordan, and they're creating open mics, they're creating classes, and the best of those guys get offered the opportunity to go to Dubai and perform on TV. And then they're cultivating more and more stand-up comedy I'm just seeing so much healing that's happening, because remember, one of the things we also take for granted is that a comedian is one microphone, one person, and their voice, their random opinion on whatever in front of masses. And in the Arab world, that can also be a dictator. Mm-hmm. So you have to be careful on what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and really honor the power you have of the microphone to have an impact on the audience and have them be heard, and not take it for granted and just, you know, say, you know, I screw the government. Because I think there's been comedians that I work with that are banned from Egypt because they put that stuff into question. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, it was a talk show host, right? A famous Egyptian talk show host.
Yeah, Bassem Youssef. I was on his show.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, when
Wow.
he came to San Francisco. And again, remember how I said my opportunity in San Francisco came from having worked with them a year prior, and they're like, you know what, you'll love Mona. We got to bring her out. I was like, cool. And I didn't get paid for anything, but the opportunity, right? Yeah. And so I was on his program, and we went and interviewed people, and it was just so cool. But yes, exactly. And there's another, I think Ahmed was actually banned from, because again, you poke a little bit, they remove you and not let you back. And he's Egyptian. So,
right. Is that something that you're careful, like that you're consciously careful of when you're writing your set? You know, to not get too close to the political edge?
Well, for me, it's really about checking my motives, right? For when I perform stand-up, and I'm doing the best I can at this, and I'm always trying to get better. But what's the motive of me, criticizing the government? What's my motive? Is it to make them feel bad that they live in a country that's their government? Or should I make fun of something else over here that's actually really frustrating, and it's innocent enough that we can collectively. I always found political humor divisive, and since my commitment is to bring people together, politics, religion, sex isn't my vibe. Because instantly, as soon as you walk in and you start talking about that, you're dividing the room, divide and conquer. I'd rather come in, and one of the first things I do anywhere I go is I make fun of the room. If you make fun of the room, or I make fun of whatever I'm wearing, everyone's in the same space, right? Because they're literally in the same space, so they can make fun of whatever goofy art's on the wall or something. So I don't like doing politics. I stay away from it, not because I'm scared, but because it doesn't serve me.
Were you warned about that? Like, did they give you any guidance when you were doing Palestine shows, or were they just like, go up there and do anything? Like, what kind of freedom did you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, you know what? The only advice that we got is don't pick at the U.S. politics that much. I think that's really what it was. Other than that, it's just free range. Don't be gratuitous, because it is still conservative society in terms of religion and whatnot. But other than that, also in comedy, there is no real guidance. And if you take someone else's guidance, it may actually not serve your best voice, because if this is your story, but your experience says, okay, don't do that, but the way her connection is and her history allows her to kind of grow within having talked about sex or female whatever, then you're kind of limiting. By taking somebody else's advice in comedy, you're kind of limiting yourself. Yes, there is some like smart things to do. Like if any advice I'd give a comedian would be, get there, know your venue early. Especially if it's like taping or something. Get to your place early. Keep an eye on the room. Pay attention to the staff. Who's like a waitress that's unhappy, or I'd give advice about how to observe and how to really command your room, but not what to say and what not to say. When I book comedians, if I've asked them to do a show based on what I saw and they show up and do something completely out of an alignment, what I've asked, please, no gratuity or whatever it is, and they just told me to go screw myself, I was like, cool, thank you, thanks for coming, here's your money, and then I just don't have them back.
Right. Yeah.
And then hopefully comedians learn by that, and some comedians don't. That's why we're such a goofy bunch of people that there's no consistency, there's clickiness, but it's just all over the place.
There's stuff for shock value.
Yeah. And you see the waves, you see trends. Like you see a lot of females right now, it's all about shock value. It's been like that since Sarah Silverman, then Amy Schumer, and then you can almost see that the industry doesn't create new voices. They like to bank on the consistent voices of, all right, here's a chick who's going to talk about how she's basically a dirty prostitute or a drunken whore. Basically, that's kind of the vibe that a lot of these women I think that they're using that voice to say, and I think that's what they think people want to hear, the shock value stuff for now. And we'll see what happens as the trend moves.
And it's so much harder, at least for me, to write stuff that doesn't have the shock value. Shock value is easy, but if you have to like stop and think about what you're going to write and how it's going to impact people, and you can't just drop F-bombs
right.
to get laughs, then that's like, I really respect comics who don't do that.
Yes.
Because it's just smarter. Like,
totally.
You have to be so much smarter to like work around
like
that.
Brian Regan is epic.
Yeah.
And he never swears. Or another old guy, Jonathan Winters, he's passed, but you could give him a stick, put him on live TV for an hour, and it would be absolutely hilarious, and you would never swear. You'd never even worry that he would.
And that's why Brian Regan is like Utah's #1 comic.
There you go.
See? He knows his market.
He does. You mentioned, being able to, like, getting to know your venue before you perform and kind of reading the room. What were the venues like in Palestine?
Banquet halls.
Okay.
There was one banquet hall in this beautiful hotel in Bethlehem. It looked like it belonged in India, and I think it was an Indian architect. It was beautiful. I think it was called the Jaipur. Yes.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. And it was in some lower level banquet area in the middle of the summer in Palestine. And Palestine isn't too far from the deserts, right? And there was no air conditioning. And then I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. We're still, come on. Like, we're still not in the West, right? I mean, come on. So it was hot, and we're like, hey, guys, remember that one time? And I'm like, so it could be really hot. It could be, you never know, dark, but some of them were beautiful. There was another theater the second year in Bethlehem that was just beautiful. I have some pictures of it, and I don't really remember the set. I just remember how beautiful this theater was, and it was right next to the Church of Nativity. So you're sitting here telling jokes. You're like, Jesus was born down, like right next door. And, and it just, it's the power of being in Palestine and performing, especially someone as ethnically combined as I am, where when I used to go as a kid to Palestine, they're like, hey, can you go back to tell Bush that he should stop this? And it was all this, like, I was never fully Palestinian, and here I don't always feel fully American, but doing stand-up in Palestine where I could use my American art and my Arab innuendos and put it together, it was like the most healing aligned I've ever felt ever. So it was such a beautiful opportunity to do those shows there. I know I'm not talking about the venues, but the venues are
No.
Sometimes there was no sound. Sometimes,
So do you think, because in Chicago, anybody can go into a bar on any random night, well, on an open mic night, and stand up there and do their 5 minutes. So I feel like comics are a dime a dozen in Chicago. Do you feel like because there isn't that, like, what am I trying to say? There isn't that pool in Palestine, in the Middle East, that comics are more elevated?
In terms of like having access
or prestige, I guess.
Oh yeah. So it's building in Dubai for sure. There's one guy I get to work with. He's the guy. He's the guy, like, when Dave Chappelle's people come in town, they contact him. When Trevor Noah's people, they contact him. He's a great comedian. He teaches stand-up. He performs for companies, and he's that guy. And he's worked his way to become that. So in terms of Palestine, there's only so much access. I know that there was folks in Gaza that were trying to do some stuff online. I was trying to get connected with them. I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but there's a lot more coming up now. Yeah. I think they've been inspired to use their voice. They see the access to social media. I think the millennials of the Middle East really have a voice, and I think that laughter is a really powerful weapon. And I know that they're starting to use it, so don't be surprised if there's going to be like a lot more. I know there's SNL for the Middle East. There's just a lot more. There's America's Got Talent where there's comedians coming out. Now, again, there was already comedy there, but it was more like a vaudevillian or like a guy that, John Leguizamo, where he was a one-man show type stuff. Mm-hmm. It was like that. It was like a guy dressed as a woman, then he'd be his wife, and then he'd change. There was a lot of that like play-like stuff. So it's not that. We brought humor to the Middle East. It's more like and this really does go to some of the guys from Axis of Evil. I'm not familiar if you're familiar with. In 2006, there was an Axis of Evil tour that was supported by Comedy Central. It was Ahmed, Maz Jobrani, who's Persian, Aaron Cater, and Dean Abidullah. These four guys. They went to like Jordan, they went all over, and that in 2006 really did set the groundwork. That set the seed in motion so that as some of these kids are coming up now, they're like, oh, I want to do that. And also with YouTube and stuff, so you're gonna see a lot more there.
Yeah.
In terms of comedy clubs. And then, they will be elevated, but it's really very raw and new right now.
Wow, that's exciting.
It is. It's really dope.
You get to pave the way for comedy in the Middle East.
Yeah. I think when I filmed my set with Comedy Central, I said to them afterwards, I said, listen, if there's ever any support you need, especially around the females, because knowing your power as a female performer, whether it's a Muslim woman or not, is new, because I believe in our culture, in my particular culture, and also women in general are raised not to make mistakes. We got to come out like, if we're going to do something, it's got to be right. We can't I'm going to screw up this business first and then I'll have another one. Just kind of guys, right? Right. So I think in our culture, and we judge each other so much that we're so scared to say something or so scared to push the boundaries that I said, let me know if there's any support you need around female comedians. She's like, absolutely. They're one of the producers. And she said to me, she's like, listen, I will always put a female on stage, even if I don't think she's that funny, to give her the access, the opportunity, and also have an impact on other comedians. I'm like, that's a commitment. That's a commitment from Viacom, from Comedy Central, and how they see females in stand-up, which is amazing. And when I was performing in Palestine, one of the things at the end of the tour, the first tour, now remember, I had been there so many times as a woman, but as a female comedian, I had never done that. So I was like, how come no one's making a big deal about the fact I'm the only female on this lineup of all 8 men, and I'm the only one? And the people were like, okay, you're an Arab woman doing what you do. Like, what's the problem? And I was like, oh, and I really healed. My relationship to being an Arab woman is created on my understanding of an Arab woman from an American perspective. That of limiting, docile, weak, scared. In the Arab world, it's like, no, you own a business. I'm the dentist. My husband works for me. I mean, there's a lot. It feels like we see the Arab world as almost still old school and backward in terms of our relationship with women, when really that's our own creation of how we see that world, and probably a whole other socioeconomic, political conversation that we can have later. But it was very empowering to know that.
That's so powerful to hear, because I feel the same way about Latinas that grow up in the U.S. versus the ones that kind of grow up in Latin America, where it seems that here some sociologist in the 1940s wrote a seminal essay about machismo in Latin America, and people decided that we never evolved past that. So I get all these weird projections, where people ask me if my dad was really authoritarian, or all these super old school things like, oh, did your mom not work because she's Peruvian? And I'm like, no, she couldn't keep a career because my dad moved around all the time. But when they first got married, she was making 3 times as much as my dad, and my dad was okay with that,
Right.
And I've always found that dichotomy really interesting, because I see it sometimes internalized by Latinas who grow up here.
Yes.
Where it's like, oh, our culture, we're we're supposed to be either super sultry, or where we're supposed to be these docile homemakers. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about, because that's not what I grew up with.
Right. Exactly. I completely agree. And it's good to know that I'm not alone in that. I almost was just shocked. How could I have thought myself to be this? And it's really just some of those, in the States, we also have this old school Calvinist root, so it makes sense that we saw it in this way, not in power. Or they think of us, Arab women get it and Latino women get it, that we're crazy, we're feisty, we're dangerous because you never want to tame one of them. It's like, really?
No, yeah. It's so weird. It's we're either absolutely quiet, submissive, almost in a borderline abusive relationship with the men in our lives, or it's bitches be crazy. They're always yelling and talking with their hands. I'm like, well, sometimes they deserve it. But beyond that, it's insane. Yeah, that it's it's 2 competing identities that are thrusted upon us, but with no nuance in the middle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Untamable Mustangs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to kind of talk a little bit more about that, because in a way, I think even here, when you tell people that you as a woman traveled alone in the Middle East, I mean, what were the reactions? Did people say was that difficult? How could you do that? Or
I think when I traveled to Palestine, even just as a young kid or to do tours, it's like, oh my God, be safe.
Yeah.
And really, one of the things, it's the same when you tell someone, oh, I live in Chicago. Oh, my God. Oh, no. Like, there's about pew, pew all the time. Like, chill, all right? Not everyone, you're not getting shot at. Because you're not going to go jogging on the west side with earbuds at midnight. Okay, like... But yeah, everyone did think it, like, oh, be careful. Everything, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm a Chicagoan. Like, one of the things I have to say, I really have taken on, and I kind of like it. I wear like a Chicago flag, and I'm sure it's my own creation of what it is to be a Chicagoan. We're like a lovable asshole. Like there's this combo plate of like I don't meet a lot of not awesome people from Chicago, honestly. And wherever I go in the world, comedy or not, when I get introduced, like, oh, she's from Chicago, and there's instant respect. So I've lived into it. And if I'm like, oh, are you nervous about going to Palestine? I'm like, nah, man, it's my day. It's my day. I mean, I was on the west side yesterday. I'm fine. I go to the south side all the time, to get chicken or whatever it is. I don't. And as soon as somebody says it, I call them out fast. I'm like, all right. I want to change their idea. I mean, yeah, there's inconveniences, right? It stinks when you have to go, for instance, to the Israeli airport, the Tel Aviv airport. You've got to give yourself 6 hours to 7 hours in advance because you never know what shenanigans they're going to need to go through and, like, I don't know, look at every single part of every single thing you've ever had on your iPhone. You never know what they're going to do. So giving yourself time and understanding the patience of traveling in the Arab world, that's one thing. But I don't know. I just kind of, like I said, that's how I've traveled the world. If it's my day, it's my day. I mean, I lived in Southern Africa. If it's my day, it's my day.
Right? So I went to Dubai for business a few times, and then I went to Jordan afterwards, and people were like, the same thing, like, oh my gosh, you're going to get blown up in a hotel.
Yeah, see?
And I was like, no, I'm not, because I'm going to be on a nice tour. And why would Jordan jeopardize their tourism dollars?
Boom. That's a big deal. People forget about that.
Especially, like, not to be blunt, but like blonde white American gets blown up, like they're screwed.
Yeah.
And it was awesome. And like back to your point about women doing awesome things, all the women, all the people at the museum in Jordan where the Dead Sea Scrolls are women, like from management down, and that like really resonated with me because I was like, I had the same impression that they were like, don't walk the streets by yourself.
Yeah.
It's all men. They're going to catcall you. They're going to be so aggressive. And I didn't find any of that. And I saw ladies out on the streets, and I was like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you're supposed to be at home. But, like, that's not how it is. The biggest problem we had was I was with my little tour group, and we were driving out of, I want to say Damascus, but that's in Syria. What's the capital of Jordan?
Amman.
Yeah, we were in Amman, and they were like, that's the American embassy. Don't take pictures. Don't get out and walk around it. Like, just don't look at it. Like, turn your heads the other way. And I was like, of course the Americans would go in and that was their biggest fear,
right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the internationally, I feel like Americans are kind of becoming Israelis. And being so scared of we're creating more fear.
Yes.
We're actually creating, and then, whatever you create or whatever you manifest in your mind ends up showing up right there, right? If you're worried your man's cheating on you, then he's going to start cheating on you. So, like, if we're creating this level of, like, I mean, there's, like, for instance, the El Al, the Israeli plane in Chicago, it's the only plane that's off to the side with armed guards. It's like, hey, how about just tone it down? How about then you don't have flights, all right, if you're that scared?
You just
chill. But to the point of like protecting tourism, that's what I noticed in the favelas of Brazil. The favelas are cool. Everything's fine. Why? Because they got to maintain their drug trade. All right? That's it. We don't want fighting because people can't come in and get their stuff and go out. And there are very few times that there are any fightings within the favelas. They want to squelch it fast because it's affecting business. Like you said, affecting business. So.
Right. It's like Chicago, too. Like, I'm not going to go make a drug deal on a corner where I can be targeted by someone in a drive-by. Like, I'm okay.
Right.
Well, I remember a couple of years ago when I went to Guatemala, it was also all these warnings, about how it's super violent, how cartels are everywhere. Guatemala is one of the countries that's kind of sending the most like child refugees right now. So I don't want to downplay the fact that they have problems, but on the other hand, it's more like if you are part of a cartel, worry. If you're just hanging out, no one like gives a crap that you're there. Like you're just able to kind of move around fine, you know?
Or be smart about how you navigate.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Don't look at your phone. Like I mean, I'm sure you guys have had episodes about how to travel smart. Like, again, like, don't be down here looking down your phone or headbuds. If you're walking around, just pay attention to your surroundings. I was in Namibia and I was on my bike and I noticed these 3 guys walking at me. I'm like, okay, I'm cool. And I look right in their eyes. I'm good. We're good.
Yeah.
And then they came to try to take my bike. And I'm like, no. And they're like, all right, never mind. And I was like, that was the laziest robbery ever. And I was like, and I was going uphill on my bike. I was already kind of exhausted. I'm like, oh man, thanks.
Yeah. That reminds me, my best friend in Argentina was once walking out of her university and she was talking on the phone when this guy like tried to snatch it out of her hand. And she literally turned around and went like, are you fucking kidding me?
No.
And the guy's like, fine. And just like walked off. And it was just like her immediate reaction. She for sure thought that he was going to take it away. Like, that's it. My phone is gone. But that was enough for him to just be like, oh, she's going to cause trouble.
Right.
Like, I'm out. you know?
It can be as simple as putting your head up. Like they say when somebody is walking behind you, you turn around and look them in the eye.
Right.
Yeah.
Things like that. But this was just something that I remember. So I went to Israel a couple of years ago, and we did go to Palestine mostly to see like the Church of the Nativity and all those other Jesus-like things. But one thing that stood out from that trip is that me crossing into Palestine as a Peruvian passport holder was very easy, simple, friendly, whatever, especially compared to me going back to the States as a green card resident and passport holder, where they actually took me away, put me in a little room to question me because they never explained why. They don't. You can ask them and they'll be like, ma'am, you just have to come with us or whatever. And it's something that stuck out where it's like, people are so afraid of going to places like Palestine, thinking that it's going to be some like insane high stakes situation, when really a lot of times I'm mostly scared to come back to the airport in the US because you have no idea how the hell they're going to treat you.
Your own home treats you
worse. You know, it tends to be terrible.
Unpredictable.
And unpredictable. And the part that always bothered me the most is them not just giving you the courtesy of saying, we have to look more into you because of this. I get that maybe for security reasons they can't say everything, but even a simple thing like, unfortunately on our computer something has shown up, just give us a couple of minutes. Instead, they're just silent and you have no idea what they're going to try to pin on you. So, yay. Yeah. So tell us about your Comedy Central in Dubai and your general impressions of Dubai.
Do you know what Dubai is? Dubai, and I figured it out when I was listening to people at Dubai just saying stuff in my face. They're like, Mona, guess what? This is the tallest building in the whole world. I was like, yeah, all right, cool. Right? I'm from Chicago. They're like, Mona, come here. I want you to see the brand new Ferris wheel we're making. This one is coming out summer 2018. I was like, word. I'm like, how about we tone this down, okay? You guys are Chicago at the end of the 1800s, all right? Let's just chill down. And that's really what it feels like. They're Chicago at the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s, where this was the city of the century. We were doing things that we shouldn't be doing. We were like, oh, you know what? We need a sewer system, or we're going to do this and that. And we had a Ferris wheel. And then I'm like, who's riding Ferris wheels anyway? It takes an hour to get around that thing, okay? Nobody cares about a Ferris wheel. The fact that they're working so hard to build it is just, it's all ego. Or it's all flash. Or it's like, oh, you know, we've got British managers, we got German engineers, we got Arab money, and we've got Pakistani and Sri Lankan labor, Indian labor. So let's do something with it. And I get the innovative idea of the emir, basically the guy who basically the president, the king area. I get his vision. But some of it, for me, I'm an opinionated Chicago, and I'm like, just chill. Like, where they're injecting liquid basically into the clouds so that there's more rain, right? Oh, then you have the islands, right? You've seen all so the stuff that they're doing is, they're trying to be innovative, and I get it. I mean, I totally get it. But it seems excessive. And as a Chicagoan, I'm like, all right, but are you serving a purpose? Are these, because like when you look at new Dubai versus old Dubai is beautiful. Old Dubai looks like an old Arab, city. New Dubai, because there's no consistency in the urban planning, which affects me, right? Because my history in urban planning, there's no homogeneity there. Is that the right word? Or whatever. The buildings look so different. That's like, for instance, like you go to Pullman in Chicago, you know that's Pullman because of the buildings have the same the maroon color and the green awning. Like you can tell Chicago architecture. You can tell that there was a consistent plan of action here. There, it's just like, I've got a lot of money, let's build building. Okay, no problem. I want more building dollars in this one. I want to look at like this. It's like, dude, like you can tell, like Kuwait has the same issue where you're driving by and you see the houses and you can tell, all right, that guy was obviously Swedish because look at that house. That guy is from like the Black Forest in Germany. This guy is American. Clearly, like you can tell by the house, the architecture, there's no consistency. It kind of just looks like a bunch of people are all playing Sims on the same game, but not talking to each other, so it's just kind of blah. That's my opinion.
And it's tiny. Like I remember looking out the window as I was flying away, and just like you can see the whole city from the airport.
Yes, you can.
Which is so weird to me, and it's just like over the top for the sake of being over the top.
Bingo.
Like for example, brunch. So you have brunch in Dubai. I have friends who are expats there.
Yeah.
And so we went to brunch, and brunch is a big deal. And it was like a whole mishmash of stuff. Like it was all you can drink, and we got there at like 11. And so we had like, the first course was Cornish pasties. The next course was sushi.
See?
The next course
That's what I'm talking about.
was Argentine steak. And you're like, hey, who's eating all this?
Yeah. And I'm gonna get sick.
Right? And then it turned into like bar games, but not just like bar games like Jenga, like giant Jenga and deluxe beer pong.
Right.
And then it turned into a club. And so I was...
Yes! I love it.
So I was at brunch from like 11 a.m. to 3 a.m. the next day. And I was like, at one point I stood around and was like, what the hell just happened? Like, because you don't move either, so it messes with your sense of time.
Yeah. And your digestion.
And your digestion.
Is it like a casino where the lights are also at a weird level, so you have no idea what time of the day it is?
You start outside, you eat brunch outside, and then you go inside for like
Oh my gosh.
and then you go out on the AstroTurf lawn once the DJ sets up.
Oh my god.
That's like if you were gonna be held hostage, that's like the way to do it.
Yeah. And then in the background there are people skydiving.
Right.
Yes. It's just it's all over the place.
It's the weirdest place ever. Like,
and one of the things that they're like, I just wanted, man, I was so happy to be so close to India. I'm like, oh, I want some Indian food, right? And I was staying at the Marriott, which is the tallest Marriott in the whole world. I'm like, all right. They're like, do you want to go to the Indian restaurant? I'm like, yeah. Like, okay, it's the 5-star restaurant. I'm like, I just want a samosa. This is the best samosa in the whole world. I'm like, dude, can we just tone it down? Do you want coffee? Best coffee in the whole. I'm like, you know what? How about we tone it? I'm gonna cross the street. There was a 7-Eleven. I was like, yes, I got my samosa. I got the coffee I wanted, and it was classic, just a 7-Eleven. That's all I wanted.
because that's where all the Indian workers who built Dubai are going
Thank
to
you.
samosas.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what I got from this is that Dubai is extra. Like,
Super extra.
Super extra.
Gold bar, like ATMs dispensing gold bars in hotels.
Yeah.
And
God.
hotels that charge you to go like look in the lobby, like to hang out in the lobby. And everybody there I found is super like, hey, it's such a weird mix of people and they're all super shady. Like I was there for a dental show and there was a temp worker and his mom, I think his mom was Egyptian, his dad was Saudi, his grandfather was a Lebanese pasha, but he was also Spanish. And I was like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, I'm a filmmaker. And I'm like,
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
But with that being said, performing for them was so powerful because to me, it was the diversity I was raised with. It was the diversity I like to connect with in Chicago. Like my show that I run at the Diversity Bowl. Like I love diversity. My lineups are always diverse. My audiences are diverse. So standing and in Dubai, performing for folks that worked with the British government, this guy was Swedish, an engineer. It was literally the UN. It was this. It felt like I was on the moon with all this. So that for me, I could bob and weave with my jokes, using my German accent. My experience living in Africa or whatever. Like it really did resonate powerfully from like my heart, being able to connect on such a global scale and make a global audience laugh. So that was the best part about performing having in Dubai is really getting a sense of like, I got to come back here because that's an audience.
Yeah,
Right.
it's so weird. What is it, like 8% of the people that live in Dubai are actually Emiratis?
Right.
And everybody else is expats who've been brought in to like build things and launder money.
Well, that's what I'm like, you guys be careful with your spending.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like you go to the gym and you got one trainer and there's a bunch of us that are all, you're yelling at us like, hey man, there's one of you, there's a bunch of us. How about that? And we're strong now. So how about, you know, easy with the dumbbells? You know, it's kind of like that with Dubai. It's like, you want 8%, we could take over a little bit.
Yeah. And when shit goes south, all those expats are so quick to leave. Like in 2008, after the market crash, people drove to the airport in their BMWs, left the keys in the ignition, and fled the country.
Wow.
So,
Oh my God.
yeah. So, and then I went in, I think 2008 and, gosh, a couple years ago, and the difference, like 2008, there were all these holes in the ground where buildings were supposed to go up, and they had just been abandoned.
Yeah.
And it's weird to me that such a tiny emirate has such power. Like, think of all the, like, Indian construction workers that affected. Like, all of a sudden they're cut off. And just, like, humanitarian issues and...
Yeah. And they have, like, the most cranes in one city, I think.
Yeah.
Or one country, rather. The most cranes. I was like, wow. Well...
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of deaths on the constructing of those buildings.
Yes.
So that's the other thing. But
yeah, deaths.
I mean, are there even enough people to fill those buildings, or that's not the point of building all these buildings?
I don't think that's the point.
No, because
Okay.
a lot of it's mixed use. Like you have residential
Yeah.
with like, you know. So I think, but you know, you can get a hotel, like a kind of like a hotel room type apartment, and you really live in Russia, and it's just your Dubai apartment.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, the people that live there were cool. The energy of like we're the best in the world is kind of like but the audience was so worth it, and I would go in a heartbeat. So if Dubai right now, the secret police are listening, I love you and I'm sorry if I've criticized you at all.
Right.
It is a crazy place. Like, I don't know. I don't think I ever met an Emirati. I think I just met, like you said, like Germans and British people and people from Asia. So yeah, it's weird.
How did you choose your set for that specific audience?
That's a good question. When I was asked to come and I said, yeah, that was it. So knowing that it was going to be on TV, I was like, all right, I want my best stuff. Wondering how, and this really was a journey figuring out how to do the 2 different 7-minute sets. I contacted 2 booker, manager, comedian powerhouses here in Chicago. One by the name of Mary Lindsay, who owned and ran All Jokes Aside and Jokes and Notes. She now is working back and forth between LA, a lot of really powerful comedians she manages, like Lil Rel and Dion Cole. I contacted her, and I contacted Bert Haas from Zanies. And I said, you work with comedians that perform on television. I'm going to be performing on television in the Arab world. I need some advice. And both of them said, just do your best stuff. I said, do I need to change punchlines for TV or anything? She's like, they said, no, it's going to come off that you've changed it. Just do you and be powerful about it. I was like, word. Okay, cool. Then the next part was I contacted my best friend. My best friend he's almost like my soulmate. And because he's Israeli, American Israeli, raised in Australia. And we've had a very powerful connection. And every time I have a intense situation, like when I was in Palestine, my second tour, my first show I bombed. I didn't bomb. I just didn't do the way I know I can. And he called me, and he always contacted me right when my soul needed something. Always. Whether it's a breakup, whatever it is. He was the person I'm like, listen, I'm going to Dubai. I'm like, I know. I'm like, what do you mean you know? I'm like, I know. I'm like, oh. So I said, all right, I want to work on my 2 sets. He's like, cool. And he knows all my jokes. He used to help me edit stuff. So he's like, you need to do this one, and this one. That would be great. And then this one. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, no, that's what they need to hear. And I was like, okay. He's like, listen, I want you to create it for me. So the day of the show and the day before, I was in a Dubai hotel on the phone with and I'm Palestinian, right? With my Israeli friend that's in Colorado, Skyping, delivering my jokes. Because he's also a director. So he's like, nope, do it again. And so that's one of the things, like, all right, I got myself out of my head. And a lot of comedians, all our jokes are here, right? And we're like, no, it's going to be fine. But once it comes out, I felt more fluid and felt more safe. And so then I was ready to rock and roll.
Yeah. Wow.
Does that make sense? And I was the first comedian on the lineup, and I was the last comedian on the lineup because they were doing 2 separate filmings, and I had to go change so that I could be on 2 different episodes. So I knew I had to come out powerful. I had to kill. Especially since I was the only woman on the show, right?
Yeah.
I had to murder. And I'm from Chicago. So to me, like you can't be a bad comedian coming from Chicago. I know you were saying earlier that we're a dime a dozen here. We're also the real like breeding ground of good comedians come out of Chicago.
Yes.
The thing is they don't stay, and that's why I really work hard on producing stuff here, being based here. There's much stuff as I can support comedians here. But when they introduced me, all right, she's from Chicago. When I was in London, she's from Chicago. She better not suck, and I don't. And that's really it's a beautiful thing that was able to kind of go through this process, and I had to sign away my jokes. That was the coolest thing, because I have this one joke I love so much, and I had to literally sign it away to Viacom, and I was like, that's awesome.
Whoa.
That's awesome.
So what does that mean? That you can't perform it anywhere else now?
Never again on TV.
Holy cow.
Oh, on TV.
Yeah,
Okay.
never again on TV. And if I think about doing it on TV, it has to be set up in a totally different way. Like, one time I was dreaming, what if, and then I do the joke, not the joke.
Right.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Is that pretty common?
I wish it was. You know why? Because I have seen a lot of recorded material by professional multimillionaire comedians that have done the same jokes in other recordings. So I wish it was more, but I don't. Again, a comedian works so hard on the joke. Works so hard. It's not like a singer. No, I can't even say that. Well, it is kind of like singers can say their songs over and over again. When you see Rolling Stone, you want to see their greatest. When you see, I don't know, Dave Chappelle, you don't want to hear his greatest. Right. Do you? You don't. No, you're like, because the element of surprise, right? But to be able to really legally have to give away your stuff, it forces you to make more, not rely on the crutch that once was. So that's why I was grateful to sign that stuff away. I'm like, good, this is going to force me to make more, because I'm the source.
Wow.
I'm the Tesla, right? I'm the source. Take whatever you want, but I'm the source.
It's kind of your Phoenix moment.
Yeah.
Burn this shit down. And build again.
Yes, and that's what's been happening. That's the evolution I've been going through. It's probably since, some of it since May, but really since I signed that off, I'm like, all right, here we go, baby, let's go.
Yeah.
And at the end, this is something that was so powerful for me, is at the end of the recording, we were all socializing, and I was thanking the producers. I said, I just want you to know you made a dream come true in a bigger, bolder way than ever. And thank you so much for honoring me, and I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And she said, listen, you were epic. You were the best female we've ever seen, one of the best comedians we've ever seen on the show, ever. I was like, thank you. She's like, listen, when we go to our half-hour format, we're giving you a half-hour special. So October 2018, expect a half-hour special.
What?
I was like, word? She's like, oh yeah, now you're listening. I'm like, and then I was like, yes. I'm like, because I got to go create all new material, because I gave you guys some of it. They're like, yeah, go. And I was like, and that's been my commitment since I got back from Dubai. I was like, yo, and to all my kind of like my production team, the people that I work with from my family, I'm like, yo, it's on. Opportunities, open mics. And so like I took on my own, I run an open mic now in Chicago. I mean, I kind of already was, but I really have been focusing on cultivating material and just constantly writing and like testing and calling and making, because I'm still trying to figure out my process. I mean, I've been doing this since 2010, and I still am really trying to find my groove of how to write a joke where I'm able to generate that golden thing that I had to sign away. And that golden thing that signed away, it just showed up once when I was about to do a competition, and the pressure, and I'm like, oh, and then I did this joke, and I love it. Every time I tell the joke, I love it.
That's awesome, because I don't think people don't realize good comedians make it look so easy to tell a joke, and I don't think people who don't write jokes realize all the work that went in just to creating that throwaway, or what looks like a throwaway,
right? Or the pressure we put on ourselves that it's gonna take more work than what we're actually naturally good at.
Yeah.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
You've lived in a lot of places, from what I gather, and you've traveled in a lot of places. Is there any place that stands out where you're like, that country has a great sense of humor?
That country has a great sense of humor. I do like the UK sense of sarcasm.
Yes.
So I like that. But if you're gonna say my favorite city to connect with people and make them laugh anywhere in the world, and I've been in a lot of places, not everywhere, but in a lot of places, is Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I went to go buy some stuff for hookah, and instantly, like I walked in and the clerk just scared me because I didn't see him there, and he's like, And then we just had this rapport where we were literally within 30 seconds making each other laugh. And I'm like, I don't remember why I came in here. And it just, there's a sense of like in Chicago, you can walk down the street and be like, hello, and hello, right? You get the hello back. Or you could ignore them and it's not that big of a deal, right? You could, I've messed with people just as clerks. And maybe it's what I'm generating off. That I love that our life is like right now. Not later, not when you get off work. Right? And I try to connect like, hey, how's your day going? And then we giggle, or what's the craziest client you've ever seen? Or just create engagement. And Chicagoans love to engage, right? Whereas there's a lot of other cities are kind of reserved. Like the UK, they're much more reserved until they're safe. I lived in Germany. Germans will be your best friends for life, but they've first got to trust you. And that took me a while for them to get them to trust me when I was living there. I really love Chicago. And maybe it's because I am like, you know how I'm creating you, creating me, creating you. I think you're awesome because you say I'm awesome. Because you know what I'm saying? That awesome symbiotic relationship. Maybe that's why I love Chicago so much.
Yeah. We'll talk to anybody.
We will.
I love it.
We will.
I
we
love
really
it.
will.
And my friends in other places kind of get embarrassed because I do that in other places, and they're like, "We don't do that here," and I'm like, "Why not?"
Right. Also, Chicago is the biggest small town.
Yes,
so
it really
many
is.
times you meet someone like, "Oh my God, I went." Especially, were you born in Peru?
I was born in Switzerland.
Oh, see?
Yeah,
okay.
but I have like zero memory of my time in Switzerland.
Have you ever met somebody in Chicago that you knew or met in a different country or a different city? You're like, I can't believe, how did you, or they were related to somebody that you knew?
Oh, yeah.
That happens a lot in Chicago, that I'll find somebody that knows someone that's connected to somebody. Like yesterday, I was at Berbiani, which is in Lincoln Square. It's this Greek restaurant owned by Palestinian where you go do salsa dancing. All right, it's classic. That's the place I love. That hybrid of diversity. And the owner's like, "Hey, Mona." I'm like, "Hi." I don't really know him. He's like, "Hi, I'm Anas. I know a lot about you." I'm like, "How? Hey." It's like, "No, I've seen you on social media and you're this and you're that. You know, like, I just really want to say congratulations and thank you so much for representing powerful Palestinian women." I'm like, well, stop. Like, he had known and connected so many other people, and also social media makes Chicago even smaller.
Yes.
You know, like I went to an event yesterday as well for this salon opening, and four separate women are like, "I know your face." No, I don't know your face. I know your hair, because at the salon they had been posting pictures of me with my hair and all my different headshots, so that the women recognize me from my hair. So I love the city.
Yeah. And compared to other big cities, Chicago in a way is also a small town because it can get really goofy. Like when Hot Doug's closed and there was that like epic line and people were getting engaged, a band like set up. Like, I don't know what happened in those 24 hours, but it honestly felt like a Gilmore Girls episode and like Wacky Stars Hollow, except you're in like a freaking big city.
You're right. You're right. Yeah. Or like, remember when the Cubs won? Everyone was stranded somewhere everywhere. Yeah. In cars and honking, and it's like, oh. And then like going to did you guys go to the parade or anything with downtown?
Yes.
When I biked down there, and so I biked parallel to the parade route, and I got to see families with their kids and old people. Like, there's just this sense of like, this is us. Like, these are our people. And it was, oh man, for all that time during the playoffs, this was the best. Every time I performed on the South Side, right, in neighborhoods that are pro Sox, right? Mm-hmm. All of these guys were coming out with all their Cubs gear. I'm like, I've never seen you get Jordans in that color, okay? Yeah. You know you got those Jordans just because it matches the Cubs uniform that you just bought yesterday. You know, it was good to see. It was really cool to see us all kind of come together.
When are your Comedy Central specials coming out? How can people see them? Okay.
So I don't know yet. I'm really trying to figure that out. And how to like share it, how to, create engagement. If anything, I'd say follow Comedy Central Arabia on social media, because they are like doing a great job, and they're so good at having posts in English and Arabic. Everything they do is bilingual, so it's awesome. That I don't know, but I'll share that. If you have any other questions.
No, yeah, we can definitely post the link to it. And also, where can people find you? Where can they follow you?
So my website is monacomedy.com. That has all my social media links. I'm really engaged in Instagram, and I think it's because I just like pictures. I like pictures. I like seeing funny stuff, inspirational stuff. I feel like on Instagram, they're a little bit more positive.
Yes.
Right? Than all the other social media. So I just like it. Snapchat, I'm trying to teach myself how to do it, but I kind of don't see the investment quality really. And it's just like, are you here? Am I here? It just feels like people are watching me, but I'm not sure. You know, like I feel paranoid and I'm still trying to learn it. And Facebook, you know, so Snap, I'm Mona Bologna. On Instagram, I'm Mona's Pics, MONASPIX. Facebook, it's Mona Aburmishan, or if you go to my Mona Comedy, you can find all of it.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Mona, for coming here. This was awesome. As for you listeners, if you like this episode and want to hear more, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Podbean, Stitcher, and wherever else podcasts are found. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, where we try to be positive, at XX Will Travel, and Twitter, XX Will Travel as well. Subscribe to our newsletter by going to the website xxwilltravel.com. And I think that's all for now.
Yes. Yeah. Go forth and travel.